end of the Civil War in 1865, the United States sent its war-hardened soldiers on a crusade to settle the West. Led by the growing dogma of manifest destiny, the U.S. claimed the God-given right to expand its borders from sea to shining sea. Damn any man who sympathizes with Indians. I have come to kill Indians and believe it is right and honorable to use any means under God's heaven to kill them.
Shalom, I give all honor, glory, and praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Rakakudash. I give double honors to our apostles and elders, a great millstone. Salutations to all you sincere brothers pushing his word out across the four corners of the earth. The title of this lesson, The Murderer Rising with the Light. This is pursuant to the book of Job 24 and 14. The murderer rising with the light killeth the poor and needy, and in the night is as a thief. So you go and look into the Hebrew word for murderer. It says,
Strong's H 7523, Ratzach, Ratzach.
And it states, to dash in pieces, i.e. kill a human being, especially to murder, put to death, kill, manslayer, murderer. And it states slayer, murderer, murder, slaying, manslayer. So that made me think through the spirit, who can that slayer be? And this is the book of Genesis 27:38. And Esau said unto his father, hast thou but one blessing? My father, bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. And you go into the word blessing, it goes into a divine benediction or gift. Verse 39, and Isaac his father answered and said unto him, behold, thy dwelling should be the fatness of the earth and of the dew of heaven from above. Verse 40, and by thy sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother, and it shall come to pass when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. Verse 41, and Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father are at hand, then will I slay my brother Jacob. So there go that word again, slay. So that manslayer or that murderer is referring to Esau, which is the biblical identity for the so-called Caucasian race today. Because Esau knew that Jacob, which represents the children of Israel, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, Hispanics, and Native Americans, which is going to that divine benediction, those divine gifts, ultimately is talking about sovereignty, which is going to the kingdom of heaven. So even though Esau has this blessing right now on this earth, as the fatness of the earth, which is the best parts of the earth where he stays and dwells at, he has the blessing also by the sword. But that does not satisfy Esau at the end of the day, because he knows what's more important. And that's talking about the blessing that was bestowed upon Jacob, our forefather. And by us being the inheritance of Jacob, we are associated with that divine blessing as well. So until this day, Esau is still trying to slay his brother Jacob. Now let's go back to Job 24 and 14. The murderer rising with the light, meaning Esau, these Edomites, Edom, Idumea, rising with the light, killing the poor and needy. So let's see what the word light is. And this is the book of Psalm 119 and 105. None, thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. And this word is referring to the scriptures, the Holy Bible. So now we know who the murderer represents. We know what the light represents. Now let's see who the poor and needy represents. And this is Isaiah 41:17. When the poor and needy seek water, and there is none, and their tongue faileth for thirst, I, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, will hear them. I, the power of Israel, will not forsake them. So this is going to the children of Israel, the Israelites, Yahshua Allah. We are those people that in the spirit of despair, brokenhearted, last hired, first fired. So we are those people that's in that spirit of heaviness, the Israelites, because that contract that we broke against Yahweh, therefore we are suffering the shame and all the negativity in this world. And a part of that is being poor and needy. And that's referring spiritually and also physically. We are that poor and needy generation. Okay, again, so back to Job 24 and 14. The murderer rising with the light killeth the poor and needy, and in the night is as a thief. So now we know by spiritual default that this is referencing to Esau. And this is from history.com. And the title says Manifest Destiny. And this article was published on April the 5th, 2010. Manifest Destiny, a phrase coined in 1845, is the idea that the U.S. is destined by God. It advocates belief to expand its dominion and spread democracy and capitalism across the entire North American continent. The philosophy drove 19th century U.S. territorial expansion and was used to justify the forced removal of Native Americans and other groups from their homes. So this dogma that Esau used on our people, the so-called Native Americans, which are from the tribe of Gad, the so-called Seminole Indians, which are from the tribe of Reuben, and also the so-called Mexicans, which are from the tribe of Issachar. When they was here in America, before Esau came and terrorized and pillaged them, they were at one with the land. So when the murderer came and rise upon them, which is going to these Edomites, they came and brought their Bibles, guns, and disease. And they forced that democracy on our people to get them to accept so-called Christianity. But the way that they did it, they manipulated the scriptures amongst our people, and they called it manifest destiny. But in some sense, it's true because of us breaking the laws of Yahweh Shai. This was a part of our punishment if we do not agree to the terms and conditions of that contract by keeping the laws, that this was going to come upon us, that we were going to get destroyed by those lawless enemies. And this is referring to the Edomites. So in some sense, this manifest destiny is definitely true. But what Esau don't know, that dogma that he pushed on our people, that it's a manifest destiny part two. So all that entire wickedness and all the bloodshed that Esau sowed upon our people, he's going to reap it right back. So it says the philosophy drove 19th century U.S. territorial expansion and was used to justify the forced removal of Native Americans and other groups from their homes. So Esau was using the scriptures upon our people. He was manipulating it, just like he does today in his so-called Christianity religions and Roman Catholicism. It's no different. And it says the rapid expansion of the U.S. intensified the issue of slavery as new states were added to the Union, leading to the outbreak of the Civil War. When Esau came over here, he used the Bible upon our people, the so-called indigenous people on this land. So that was the light that the murderer was using on the poor and needy. That leads me to the book of Sirach, the 12th chapter and the 16th verse. An enemy speaketh sweetly with his lips, as it states in the book of Psalm, the 55th chapter, that his words were smoother than butter. But what was in his heart? It was war. And as you can see, if you read different accounts of what the so-called white man did to our people over here in America, in this case, I'm talking about the so-called Native Americans, it was horrible. Whereas Esau would have butchers and they would be selling human flesh of Gad and Reuben to other Edomites for dog food in the name of Christianity. So it says an enemy speaketh sweetly with his lips. So that's exactly how Esau came amongst our people when he came to the shores of America. They spoke those smooth, enticing words to our people. You know, we want to be peaceful amongst you in this land. You know, we want to abide by the land. Just saying all these type of enticing and smooth words. But in his heart, he imagined how to throw thee into a pit. He will weep with his eyes, but if he find opportunity, he will not be satisfied with blood. There's so many accounts we can name how Esau did this amongst the tribes, with the so-called Negroes, the so-called Latinos, the so-called Hispanics, and the so-called Native Americans. This book by the name of The Devastation of the Indies, a brief account by Bartolome de las Casas. And it's a great book to have, and just more proof how Esau uses the light, which is going to the word, the Bible, on our people, in order for him to gain his control. And it states, 500 years after Columbus' first voyage to the New World, the debate over the European impact on Native American civilization has grown more heated than ever. Among the first and most insistent voices raised in that debate was that of a Spanish priest, Bartolome de las Casas, acquaintance of Cortez and Pizarro and shipmate of Velasquez on the voyage to conquer Cuba. So the so-called Cuban Indians was over there living peacefully amongst each other, which are from the tribe of Manasseh. In 1552, after 40 years of witnessing and opposing countless acts of brutality in the new Spanish colonies, Las Casas returned to Seville, where he published a book that caused a storm and controversy that persists to the present day, because this book was bringing about the shame of these so-called Christians, what they did to the indigenous people on the different shores of America, North America, South America, Central America. That's why this book is controversial. The devastation of the Indies is an eyewitness account of the first modern genocide, a story of greed, hypocrisy, and cruelty so grotesque as to rival the worst of our century. Las Casas' rights of men, women, and children burned alive, 13 at a time, in memory of our Redeemer and his 12 apostles. He describes butcher shops that sold human flesh for dog food. Give me a quarter of that rascal there, one customer says, until I can kill some more of my own. And this was referring to Israelites, the poor and needy. And it says, slave ship captains navigate without need of compass or charts, following instead the trail of floating corpses tossed overboard by the ship before them. Native kings are promised peace, then slaughtered, as we read back in the Sirach, the 12th chapter, how he spoke sweetly with his lips. But at the end of the day, it's war in this so-called white man's heart, because this is how Yahweh Shah designed Esau to be. He's that vessel of dishonor. So of course he's going to be opposed of righteousness and being moral and having integrity. He's going to be the total opposite of that. Whole families hang themselves in despair. Once fertile islands are turned to desert, the wealth of nations plundered, millions killed outright, whole peoples annihilated. And it's another account in this book on page 32, how it states in the island of Hispaniola, which is current Dominican Republic and Haiti, when the Spaniards first landed here, and the island of Hispaniola was the first land when they made it over here to the New World, and they came in the name of Christianity. They came with Bibles, and they totally slaughtered and annihilated our people over there, the so-called indigenous people over there. And what did Esau, the murderer or the slayer, do? He rose up and used the light, which is the Bible, and he perpetrated lies and manipulations upon our people, the poor and the needy, all in the name of Christianity. Then over here in the U.S., they coined it as manifest destiny, but they used the Bible as well. So as you can see, this is what our forefather Job was saying in the spirit. Job 24:14, the murderer rising with the light killeth the poor and needy, and in the night is as a thief. So Esau stole this whole landmass, and many other countries as well manipulated the scriptures upon our people in order to gain control. For example, on the movie Book of Eli, when the guy stated that he need that book, referencing the Bible, and the other Edomite stated it's just an effing book. And the Edomite scolded him for that. He said it's not an effing book. It's a weapon. He was just going to how he can use it for control on the people. So just think about where that concept really came from. It came from when these Edomites came over here to the New World. But ultimately, it was manifest destiny played out by Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua for us going off. And that was our punishment. And that was the true judgment that Yahweh Yahushua put upon our people. But at the end of the day, it's always light at the end of that tunnel, especially for our people. So what these Edomites and these other nations do not know, there is a certain thing called Manifest Destiny Part 2. And with that, hope y'all was edified. Y'all stay strong. Shalom.
Unable to obtain the required 3/4 consent, the U.S. seized the Black Hills with an act of Congress in violation of the 1868 Treaty of Fort Laramie. Incensed by the illegal seizure, negotiator for the U.S. Henry Benjamin Whipple wrote, I know of no other instance in history where a great nation has so shamefully violated its oath. Our country must forever bear the disgrace and suffer the retribution of its wrongdoings. Our children's children will tell the sad story in hushed tones and wonder how their fathers dared so to trample on justice and trifle with God. After breaking treaties, seizing native lands, and destroying our system of life, the U.S. government introduced another element of the genocide of Turtle Island's indigenous people: assimilation. Kill the Indian, save the man. In the 1880s, the U.S. government joined forces with Christian and Catholic missionaries to steal Native children, as young as 2 years old, from their families, ship them to schools far away, burn their clothes, and cut their hair, deprive them of loving family contact for years, and use mental and physical abuse to force their assimilation into American society and the Christian religion. There are but two goals for the Indians: civilization or annihilation. In 1883, the U.S. created the Code of Indian Offenses to criminalize our culture and spiritual practices such as the sun dance, the giveaway, gifts for the bride, feasts, and medicine men. Punishments included fines, hard labor, imprisonment, and withheld rations. In 1885, the U.S. Congress continued its assault on tribal sovereignty by passing the Major Crimes Act, which unilaterally extended U.S. jurisdiction over major crimes into sovereign Lakota territory. In 1887, the U.S. Congress approved the General Allotment Act to divide communal land of the Great Sioux Reservation into individual parcels of privately owned property assigned to tribal members. Our people had no concept of individual ownership of our Mother Earth. The Indian must be imbued with the exalting egotism of American civilization, so that he will say "I" instead of "we," and "this is mine" instead of "this is ours." 2 years later, in 1889, in violation of the 1868 Treaty of Fort Laramie, the U.S. Congress passed an act to divide the Great Sioux Reservation into 5 separate and smaller reservations, including the Pine Ridge Reservation. The U.S. government opened the remaining 11 million acres of Sioux Treaty territory for public purchase, including sacred sites and burial grounds our people used for thousands of years. Having wronged them for centuries, we had better, in order to protect our civilization, follow it up by one more wrong and wipe these untamed and untamable creatures from the face of the earth. By 1890, our Lakota people, once powerful and free, were entirely dependent on the U.S. government. The U.S. had forcibly removed our people from our homeland, confined them to reservations, cut their rations by half, stolen our children, and decimated the great herds of our buffalo relatives. On the 29th of December, 500 soldiers of the U.S. Army's 7th Cavalry Regiment surrounded Bigfoot's band of about 350 Lakota people at Wounded Knee Creek, and along with 4 rapid-fire Gatling guns, massacred 312 of our men, women, and children. Our people know Wounded Knee as a massacre. The U.S. government calls it a battle. 23 U.S. troops were awarded the Medal of Honor. Something else died here in the bloody mud and was buried in the blizzard. A people's dreams died here. It was a beautiful dream. The nation's hoop is broken and scattered. There is no center any longer, and the sacred tree is dead.